Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I figured I would start by first introducing myself to everybody because there's a lot of new names on this list, which is really exciting. My name is Alexandra Janelli, and I work in Manhattan as a hypnotherapist and life coach. So I work with clients to help them really create positive changes in their life by using a very conscious tool that then transfers into the subconscious workings. And I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about hypnotherapy, and I'm certainly happy to answer those later. But what I wanted to focus on today, because I think it's the most important part of what we're all going through, is this idea of energy. And this idea of energy really works on a basic law and principle of energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's just transferred from one form to another. Right? So what does that mean, right? We've all learned about it in science class. We've sort of experienced when we go for a run, how our energy gets turned into heat and then maybe sweat. But what does it mean for us in terms of our personalities? And how does that show up in our life as an energy that we experience in relation to other people or even to ourselves? So what we're going to talk about as we go through today is energy levels. And I hope everyone can see the screen as we go through it. If for any reason you're having a problem, just let Gloriana know by typing a comment in to her, and we will get going. So I am a certified coach. I did my coaching several years ago, actually, learning this wonderful assessment that is going to take us through all these wonderful energies that we go through on a daily basis. And so what we start with is talking about, it's all about energy, right? And when we go through experiences such as this pandemic that's happening right now, you're going to notice that a lot of people are going to be experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety. You might even notice anger coming out. And then you'll also start to see, which I'm seeing, which makes me really happy, a lot of people banding together to help. And this is what we're going to talk about, is how do you choose these energy levels on a day-to-day basis to say, okay, I'm experiencing this energy level, but how do I get up to this less egocentric energy to become much more aware, much more open, much more proactive? And as we do this, there is an assessment that I will talk about that you can take that is available, that if you're interested, at the end we'll go through how we go about setting you up to take that assessment also. So the idea that you're going to come away with today is that you're going to come away with a tool that, one, is going to help you identify what energy level you're at any time during your day. Two, you're going to learn how to deactivate it so that it doesn't hold as much fear or anxiety. And then three, how do you shift it? And then we're going to incorporate this into the language that you use and other resources that can help you really take advantage of being in control and more confident with the energy states that you're going through. So as I said, the law of conservation of energy is energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It only changes from one form to another. And let's face it, stress happens, right? But what happens when we get stressed? And in order to understand that, we're going to start with that there's two types of energy. We have anabolic energy and catabolic energy. Anabolic energy is an energy that really builds things up, while catabolic energy can break things down. That's the simplest form. And I want everyone, as we go through this, to really think about and take into account that neither is good or bad, right? There's a yin to a yang with everything. That with anabolic energy, while we probably want things building and growing, there are times when we need catabolic energy too. So for example, if a lion is chasing us, which I hope doesn't happen to anybody, we need that catabolic energy to break down our cells to release energy so that we can flee. And so there's always a positive and a negative per se to any energy level. But what we're going to go through in just a moment is to recognize how anabolic energy and catabolic energy show up in our personalities and how they show up in our interactions with people and how do we handle that. So the next thing we're going to go through is there are 7 different energies. And I know this is a rather hard to read page if you're on an iPhone. So I'm just going to skip to the next slide, which this is just the quick reference. So at any given moment, there are these 7 different energy levels that are all at play. So the first one is what we call the victim state. And I know it can be very triggering for people to hear the word victim, but I want you to think about it as a state of, I'm at the effect of life. I'm at the effect of things happening to me. And therefore, in this energy level, or any of these 7 energy levels that we're going to go through, there's always going to be an emotion. There's going to be a thought pattern that happens, and then there's going to be an action level. There's going to be an action that happens. So, for example, if you're in the level 1, you're going to experience a lot of guilt, worry, fear, stress, anxiety. The thought process might be, why bother? I'm only going to lose. And your action potential to do something from this energy level will be very low. And this is why we call it a catabolic state. It is a high catabolic energy state. Now, you might notice when you're around people that have a lot of fear, a lot of stress, a lot of worry, that you'll feel it. You can feel that energy level around them as well. And so we try not to judge it. We just hold space for it. And we recognize for a lot of people, when I get them into or have clients who are in the victim state, the first step is just having them acknowledge, like, this is what it is. It's energy level 1. It's not good. It's not bad, because there are benefits to being in this state too, as we'll go through, because there's certain energy levels that do harmonize in some ways to benefit each other. Now, as we go up into level 2, what you'll begin to recognize is we get into what's called fighter energy. And fighter energy comes with the emotions of anger, frustration, resentment, disappointment, struggle. There's a lot of energy that either is going out to other people, where the thought process becomes, I win, you lose. Or it can be anger, frustration at yourself, like, why did I do that? That was so stupid. But the reason that it's a higher, well, not higher anabolic, but it is less catabolic energy, is because you're more likely to do something about it when you're in this state, because you're angry. And so when you're angry, there's an energy to it. There's power. And so you're more likely going to have more action potential, which is why it is a less catabolic state. Now, level 3 is a very interesting state. I kind of call it a transition place. If you begin to, as you function through these energy levels, you'll recognize level 3 is what we call the rationalizer. It's a state where the feelings, it's justification, tolerance, you'll see a lot of coping mechanisms at play. And the idea thought process is, I win. If you win too, that's fine, but I win first. And usually this is a coping mechanism to get to the next level, because you want to rationalize levels 1 or 2 to get to where you'd like to be. But what you'll find with people who end up at level 3 is you're really not moving forward. You're just sort of staying in this tolerant state of conditions and experiences. Level 4 is a very interesting state right now, because you're going to see it a lot of people coming forward to take care of others, to say, we're here. I know, Gloriana, you exhibited this beautifully when you reached out to me saying you wanted to help, you wanted to get the energy, momentum moving. Level 4 is what we call the caregiver state, and it's where you finally start to get low anabolic energy coming through. So there's still a little catabolic, but you're starting to release that to get into the anabolic energy. And the caregiver energy is a beautiful energy. It's one of, I love you, I care about you, you're important to me. There's a lot of focus on helping. So the thought process here is, don't worry about me, this is all about you. How can I help you? Now, the interesting thing about level 4, you would think this was a lot of anabolic energy, but level 4 energy actually can come from a place of, I can fix you, I see the problem, and I want to help you by fixing it. And this can also lead, this energy level can lead to a great deal of codependent relationships. Because what happens is, and remember I talked about just a bit ago, that level 1, the victim state, the benefit of a victim state is you can have people come into your life who are caregivers and they like to take care of people. And at times a victim certainly likes that. And so it becomes this support system. Like if you look at my hands, it's like two people leaning on each other and it feels great until all of a sudden the victim goes, I feel fine, and they leave that experience. And the caregiver who gives and gives can sometimes go, well, what about me? And they feel left unfulfilled, having given too much, frustrated because they are humanitarians, and they fall into the victim place. And they don't like that, or then they get angry. And then the one thing a caregiver doesn't like is to be angry because their fear is that you're going to push people away. And so anger becomes very muffled, and then they fall back into that guilt, worry, fear zone of the victim. And the best way to get out of that can then be to go do something nice for somebody else. And so the cycle continues. And this is where there's still a lot of ego at play. Now, the way that we get into level 5, which is called the opportunist, this is really where you're putting yourself back into the picture to make it a much more rounded experience of how can we both win, right? Like I want to win, but you want to win too. And so the opportunist really begins to disconnect from judgment, right? The opportunist, I know it sounds like you're taking advantage of things when we use the word opportunist, but the idea is that we're coming at this going, what's the opportunity? What is the opportunity here to learn? What is this trying to show me? Now, a victim might say, this experience that's happening to me, that's horrible, is happening to me. The opportunist might flip it to say, this is happening for me. It's happening for me to learn, to grow, to see a bigger picture, to experience something new. And it's from our growing pains that we learn and become more dynamic people. But we have to have that mental built-in like thought process to get there. And so the opportunist really is where I try to shift people at the beginning, is to get up into this energy level. The next step, right, and there's a lot less judgment at level 5. Now, level 6 is where you're going to see a lot of like entrepreneurs. You'll see some of your best leaders. They are fearless, they're intuitive, they're connected. They kind of operate on this really interesting plane where you're going to see a lot of things from the top down. It's like you're able to orchestrate all these moving pieces, and without fear or judgment, just understand the connectivity of them all. And there's a really strong connection with self in the sense that a visionary can really begin to understand their intuition and trust it and believe in it. And so there's this whole, there's no winning or losing, we're all in this together kind of idea. Now, the next level is level 7. While the name sounds very much like, oh, I can create everything, it is that, but it's this really blissed out state. You know it when you have it, and then it's gone. It's kind of like true love, right? Like that moment you're just so in it and nothing else matters in the world. It's this total high, but you can't sustain it. It's not necessarily a sustainable state, but you know it when you have it. It's just pure passion, pure joy. You're just so blissed out. And ideally, everyone would want to live at this state. However, what I found is when people are in this state, they can be very hard to connect with. Like they kind of seem like they're high and they just aren't connected to reality. And so being in this state can be just as hard to be around for some people as being around someone who's in a level 1. So these are your 7 energy levels. And what happens is you're going to go through these all the time. In fact, it can happen in a split second that you can go from being so like in the creator state, so blissed out, so happy. And then all of a sudden someone honks a horn because you're listening to music in your car. They honk a horn behind you. And all of a sudden you're angry, you're pissed off because you weren't paying attention, and then you get into the fighter state, and then you start screaming, and you're like, oh, what was I doing that for? Why am I doing that? Then you feel guilty that you weren't paying attention. And then, it can happen so fast. And so I want everyone to begin to think about these energy levels. While there might be some that are much more alluring to be in, there is a time and a place for them all. For example, you wouldn't want to walk into a funeral, for example, in the creator state, all blissed out and happy, because that's just not the right energy level for that. It might be time of caregiving. You could maybe say opportunist, I guess, seeing it in the, it makes us appreciate life and stuff like that. But what's really interesting about these energy levels, and I'm just going to flip to the next screen, is there's something called your energetic profile. Now, what does that mean? Each of us, if I took a snapshot of you in this moment, an assessment of you, right? This is where that assessment I was talking about comes into play. When I did my assessment, I guess it was 6 years ago at this point, I came out with this being my energetic profile. Now, that means at this time in my life, given where I was, which was I was still doing hypnotherapy, but had not gone through coaching or anything. I was not a business owner at that point, other than my private practice. This is where I show up. 100% of me shows up on a normal state that's not triggered by stress or anxiety. I am 21% a level 4, and that is my predominant energy. I am a caregiver by nature. And then I break into levels 5, where I see things as an opportunity, and I'm a visionary. But what happens to me when I get stressed out? When I get stressed out, this is my energetic profile. I fall completely, almost completely, like almost half of me goes to victim state. I am guilt-ridden. I am fearful. I am anxious. And then a little more of me goes into level 2. So I would say almost 99% of people, if we took your assessment, are going to fall into level 2. Now, some people will go predominantly into level 2 and a little bit into level 1 because they're fighters. They're angry. They're pissed off. That's their reaction. And everyone's different. I've only seen one person in all my time reading assessments who came out at a level 3. And I can tell you that person, at first we thought it might have been a false, a misreading of the test, but it turned out this person had been very highly spiritual and very guided. So her assessment was she does go to rationalize her state first and foremost in a moment of stress, which was very interesting. But if we go back to the energetic profile, this can tell me and work with, I can find out from a client what's going on for them in their life that's not working for them, right? Like, is being a caregiver really affecting their life in that they're not feeling whole, they're not feeling listened to, that their wants and desires might not be being accomplished? And so this energetic profile, the cool thing about it, unlike the Hogan assessment or the Myers-Briggs, is that this will change over time the more work you do. So I couldn't find my one that I did more recently, but I can tell you that all of my energy levels shifted up. I ended up moving, I'm still in level 4, but I ended up having more percentages up at a 5 and a 6 and a 7, which was very cool. So the goal would be I think it's about 100 questions you answer, I can go through and look at them and see where your trigger points are to help work with you to shift those as well. And I now know from having read mine, I was really shocked at how much at a level 4 I was, because I really wanted as a leader to be higher. And from my stress reaction states, I don't want to hit the lows. Now, we all do hit the lows, right? And it's not uncommon. But what I've worked with on myself and worked with other clients is you're going to go to these states 1 and 2. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But how long do you stay there, and what gets you out is really another added component, right? So if you knew these tips and tools of the energy levels that we go back to, when I go into victim state, which I do because I get stressed, my best thing to do is I rationalize it. I might skip right over to, because I'm a by nature caregiver and I don't want people to be mad at me, but I'll go right into the rationalization state to try to rationalize it, to de-energize. And then I can start to go, great, what's the opportunity here? What am I here to learn? And if this wasn't about me personally, how does that change things for me also? Now, if I'm working with someone else who falls into the level 1 state under stress, I might try to trigger them. And it's interesting when I'm working with clients, because as I get a client going who's in the victim state and I start to hear them getting angry, what becomes very clear to me is what they want, right? It's like, I'm so mad at them. They weren't doing this. And like, I could really have used some help. And I'm just so frustrated because like, no one cares. And all of a sudden I'm like, what I'm hearing you say is that you need help. And all of a sudden this anger comes out of what they really want. And I go, great. How do we get that? Because a caregiver or a rationalizer, like they're not going to say, here's what I want. An angry person might, but you're going to push someone away when you do it with anger. So how do we get that from the opportunist energy to say, this is what I need. Can you help me? Because what's interesting about the level 2 energy, when you're very angry, that's catabolic energy. Have you ever been around an angry person? Because I have. It can be very uncomfortable. It can be scary. It's very off-putting. And it either gets someone else very riled up to fight as well. And then you have 2 fighters. And when you're in the fighter state, no one's listening, I promise you. It's a I win, you lose mentality. So you're just going to throw everything in the kitchen sink and it's just going to be a whirlwind. Now there's a time and a place for that, right? Like I said, there's anger, there's energy, there's power to fighter, but does it really get you what you want in the end? So from the fighter state, you might try getting yourself, it's like, well, why am I pissed off? What am I pissed off about? And how do I get that outcome from a place of opportunity? So the best way, so the question becomes, how do you deal with people in a level 1 or 2? Because let's face it, we're all triggered recently. The first step is acknowledgement. Now, to acknowledge someone, to hold space for someone is a really big deal because we are all unique individuals. We don't necessarily understand or know how that person's life experience is playing out. Now, I might have gone through something similar. Gloriana might call me up and say, hey, I just got broken up with. This happened. Now, I've been broken up with, and I could start giving her all my advice from that breakup, but it might not be relevant. It would be a judgment and assuming to know that she's going through the exact same thing if she hasn't asked for that advice. Now, we all like to give advice. It's a place of love and careness, but it's also can be a place to fix it. But if we can just hear them out, how can I help you? Hold space for you, acknowledge you. That must be very painful. It will help Gloriana begin to find her own words, her own experience of what she's going through so that she can then shift out of it herself, giving her the power to shift. And so the best way to do this, I always think of this really great sort of metaphor, a hug, right? When a friend is going through a really tough situation, sometimes there's no words and just a hug is the best. Because what happens when you hug someone? You are literally holding space for them to be contained in their experience. There's no words you have to say, but you are just letting them know, I'm here, I have you, I'm holding you, like, what can I do for you? And we can do that from a distance for people. And I think a lot of us are needing that in this time of with everything that's going on, that it's like, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be worried. It makes sense. It's understandable. Not I understand because I might be going through something totally different, but it is understandable that. And you will see as soon as that happens, you're giving one permission to the victim or to the fighter, to the rationalizer, to anyone to have their experience. Because the more that you take away that or say you shouldn't feel that way, that's stupid you feel that way, you're burying emotion, and it's like pushing a beach ball underwater. It is literally holding down something that is gaining inertia to come up. And then you get into the inner dialogue fights for that person where it's like, I should feel this way, but I don't. And you're landing nowhere. There's no choice that's being made for you to feel one way or another. And so the more that you can acknowledge a person or even yourself, it's like, yes, I feel sad. Yes, I feel angry. Yes, I feel angry because of this. But what do I want to do about it? And that's where the action potential comes in, right? That's where we want to ask, like, what can I do with this anger that can be productive, proactive, and helpful to get my outcome? Because if it's going to scream at someone, you might feel great afterwards, but did it really accomplish what you wanted in the bigger picture? And so practicing this idea of patience and self-tolerance of your emotions as well, and meeting yourself where you're at, can be incredibly helpful in this time too. That will allow your emotion to be acknowledged so that it can then shift. So knowing that you're feeling guilt or doubt or worry, okay, I'm just at a level 1. Well, what would it be like if I were angry right now? What would that feel like? What would that look like? It will help give you a tool to shift it. And what would it look like to rationalize this situation? Whether you believe it or not, you are changing the way you think. And when you change the way you think, you change the way you feel. So I think right now would be a great place to just quickly pause and find out if anybody has any questions so far before we jump into the next part of this talk. And if you do, you can, Gloriana, do they unmute or how does this work?
Yeah, you can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat box. Let's see. There's a chat box. I just posted in it. You can raise your hand, or even if you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, I see. When you click at the top.
Yeah, everybody's on different devices. So somebody wrote, loving this. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Do you have any questions? iPhone 2? Ellen, do you have any questions? Okay, no questions as of right now.
Super. All right, great. Well, then I'm just going to keep on plowing through this. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it.
Oh, wait, one second. Does one need to desire to get to creator?
Does one need to? Great question. Interesting question. No, you do not. I think my personal opinion is that the self-help culture has really built this idea around we're supposed to be happy all the time. And I think that has become really hard to sustain because when we're not happy, we end up falling into this place of why am I not happy? I'm supposed to be happy. And you're going to start to hear a lot of catabolic language, and we're going to get into that. But catabolic language, you'll hear it come through in these ways of like, supposed to, I should. And that comes into, again, this idea of belief systems and rules that we play by. Who said we were supposed to be happy all the time? And so to be in the creator state, yes, ideally, wouldn't we all want to be happy all the time? But again, if you were happy all the time, would you be able to necessarily connect to people in need or your friends that are having a hard time? A creator, like I said, can be very hard to be around. If they're like, everything is amazing and I'm so happy. It's like, well, I feel like shit right now and I don't want to be around that energy. And it can be very berating or degrading at times to someone who has this experience of like, why aren't you feeling better? What is wrong with you? And so a victim energy, especially people who suffer from like a lot of depression, they'll be like, why am I not happy? What's wrong with me that I'm not meeting these people? I'm not normal. I'm not this, I'm not that. So there is a time and a place for creator energy, and should it be what you're aspiring to? Maybe, but not necessarily. But would you like to have the power to be able to go there by your own choosing, then I would say, sure, that would be a much better reframing of it, that I would like to have the power to choose to go there versus I have to have that be my ultimate state. So the idea is like at any time you'll be able to pick where you want to experience what energy level you'd like to experience.
Alex, I completely agree with you that the community, the spiritual or self-help community says that you should be happy all the time. And from a sound healer therapist perspective, and and also a shamanic perspective, is there's like, and you brought this up at the beginning, there's a yin and a yang. And sometimes we have to go through the process of death in order for birth. And so sometimes maybe that looks like the process of, maybe you're moving from an apartment to a mansion, but you're still going through the death of the apartment and maybe like the grieving of moving or something to get to a better place. But there's still a death, and maybe there's a death of, the holding on to worry in order to move into a fight or irrational state, so there's like a death and birth always. Yeah, and I think we see that in nature with the sun and the moon, like every day we have a balance. And so there's definitely, I think the number one thing I like everybody to remember is one state isn't always better than the other, but there's always a balance. And I think each level is beautiful in and of itself. Like I'm reading down the list here, and it's fun because then when you tap into each of these levels, it's kind of like you start to know where you are, which is, I think, kind of fun. That's just my own input. I'll let you get back to it.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, Gloriana. Thank you for mentioning that, because the interesting thing about fear, fear is very present when you're in an ego state. And ego doesn't have to mean like you're a narcissist and you're constantly talking about yourself, but ego is like self, right? And the idea is when you're in a level 1, fear is a block. Fear is in front of you. It's holding you back from taking any action. It's like, no, nope, not going to do it. But when you take fear and you can shift it behind you, fear actually becomes a very strong motivator. And that's where you're going to see it in level 2. Fear is behind you. It's like, oh my God, if I don't get this done, then like this will happen and this will happen. But there's a really interesting thing that happens when you ask yourself the question of, if I didn't have fear, what would I do differently? And you're tapping into a creative part of your mind. So this is where coaching comes into play. And I know a lot of coaching, like the term coach, I really can't stand it, to be honest, because I think coaches are there if you think of it as a sports term, telling you what to do. Coaching in terms of this type of work is about asking you the right open-ended questions. Not, do you like that? Yes or no. What do you like about that? Not why do you like it, but what do you like about it? Which are very different questions. I usually frame my questions always in a what format so that I can get to the why. So it's like, what do you like about that versus why do you like that? I don't know why I like that. Well, I like the color blue in that picture that you're using, and it's a much easier question to answer. And so when you're in these level 1 or level 2 states, the more questions you can ask yourself to get to the bottom of what you're feeling, the better. And finding friends that can listen or ask their questions is great too, or even writing them out is always really powerful stuff too. So okay, so these are your energy levels. And again, we want to keep going at this, that they're neither good nor bad. They just are, right? The good or bad would be definitely ego state. You're judging it. So there's a place for everything, right? Level 4, if you worked in customer service, is super great. If not so great if you have to fend for yourself all the time. But let's move into, let me see. Okay, again, those are stress reactions, right? We just talked about this idea that every energy level comes with a thought, an emotion, and an action, right? It is a very simple math equation for creating change. Now, if you look at it, it truly is thought plus emotion equals action. And you can play around with that. If you're not sure what emotion you're supposed to be having at this time, if you just say an action plus emotion will give, or If you, right? Okay, so if I want to figure out what emotion to have, I would say, what action and thought produce this? So if we go into, how do I change this? Right, so if you look back at this, it's a very simple math equation. So if you want to figure out what emotion, minus, put that thought over here. You want to figure out what thought to have, you know, you can shift it around by simple algebra. So this is another thing, right? Like here we are, this is just a worksheet that you can play around with. It's like core thought being, I can't get this all done, I suck, right? What level is that? It's a mixture of level 1 and level 2, right? I can't get this all done. And then the I suck part is really a lot of level 2, like I'm pissed off at myself, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. My core emotions that I'm having are shame, frustration, anxiety, fear, and dread. And if I'm thinking this way and I'm feeling this way, what action, what am I going to do about it? I'm probably going to procrastinate and do nothing about it. But if I change the way I think, I am smart, I'm capable, and I'm competent. Whether you believe it or not, because your brain does not know any differently, you might feel more empowered, more focused. And interestingly enough, you're going to have a different outcome, a bigger action, more energy, right? Less catabolic. Maybe you even end up in the high anabolic, but you're going to have a different action level to go ahead and start shifting. So any questions on this? I thought I saw something pop up.
That was just me posting in the chat to let everybody know. If you have a question, just post it in the chat.
Okay, perfect, great. Let's move on into the power of the reframe. Now, we notice that energy levels come through not only in our thoughts, not only in our emotions, not only in the energy we literally exude, right? Have you ever seen a friend walk into a room and they're just like moping or sulking? You can feel it, or an angry person. It also comes through in the language that we use. So there's anabolic language and catabolic language. And here's where they are. Catabolic language. I should, I might, I need to, I have to, I can't, must, try, always do that, you never do that. It's called catabolic because it's a low frequency. There's nothing definitive really about it. It's a little wishy-washy, right? I should try to do that. I might. That's already, I will try to get to the gym. You are already setting up a preposition with your language. You're not going to do it. And so when my clients come into my office, they're like, I'll try to do that. I guarantee you they're not going to. And so I ask them, well, what about that statement? It's okay if you're not going to. You don't have to do it for me, but what about this is not resonating with you? What about it seems overwhelming? What about it seems too hard? Let's break it down. Because Gloriana, as you mentioned, you're right. Everything has a process. And what I've realized working with like thousands of clients is that there's always a process in place. And what's interesting is that if you have a process for how you get work done, it might even play out in a process of how you get into a relationship or how you buy a house or how you raise your children. There's always a process. And so as you break down what a process might look like, you'll begin to see how do you make things into smaller bite-sized chunks to get things done where it's like, okay, I don't even know how to start looking for a job right now, but you might start breaking it down into smaller bites of like, what did I like about my last job? What did I find interesting about my past jobs? Like trying to find some commonalities as well. And so the more that we can listen to the language we hear from ourselves, I always say, listen for supposed tos and shoulds, and you're going to be so shocked at how often you hear it. And then it's going to start bugging you when other people start saying it to you. When you start hearing them go, well, you should do this. And it's like, says who? Because as a coach, I'm here to help you understand, number one, what are your belief systems? What are the rules that you live by? What are your core values? Because as we grow up and go through life, we start under the rule of our parents, of what their belief systems are for us, of what schools want from us. And at some point, as we become adults, all of a sudden, we have to start questioning those things of, I'm supposed to be nice to everybody. Now, that's a lovely belief system to have, unless for some reason that really doesn't work. And so is there a line when you get to rewrite that rule to say, I can be nice to everybody until this happens? And then maybe I want to be a little more level too, to speak up, to say what I need to say, to get what I want. And so it's really understanding, who are you first, right? Because I think there's different layers of our development, that there's a time to go inward, to go, who am I? And to have a new relationship with yourself, so that you can have a new relationship with the people around you, because everything is in relation to. I am me, but when I am with, if I go on a date, for example, do I like who I become in relation to this person? Maybe I don't. Maybe I become a worse version of myself. Maybe I become very insecure or dismissive, or maybe even like, put down, and I allow that to happen. So it's understanding, who are you in relation to yourself? And the more that you can understand your emotions, your feelings, to choose who you want to be, the more you can experience life fully. And so I always just tell people, try listening to what your language is. And if it's easier to do the work listening to other people, that's awesome too, right? Like, the more definitive you can say is, I'm going to the gym, or I'm not going to the gym. You've made a choice. The time when and it's very clear, there's not as much stress around it because you chose not to do it, or to do it. Right? Like, oh, I really should go to my friend's party tonight. I'm supposed to be a good friend, da, da, da. And then you're stuck between, should I or shouldn't I? And this is where you get indecisiveness. And when you get indecisive, it is a stress response. And it can present itself in body syndromes like teeth grinding, finger picking, nail biting. All of these amazing things can happen in the body. And so the idea is to stop it and to go, well, what do I want first? Go egotistical, go ego first. What do I want? I don't want to go. And then you might realize, but I'm going to choose to go because I want to be a good friend. I want to, not I have to, because I should be a good friend. And it's decided, it's clear. There's less stress and indecisiveness. And choice is where we get powerful. It's where we become confident. And I do believe personally that as anxiety goes up, confidence goes down. And as fear goes up, fun goes down. So try to have more fun. Try to be more confident, like, right, in our choices, in your choice. And that's where going back to the energy levels, it's like, well, I'm at a level 1 now. What would it be like to be at a level 2? I don't want to go to this party tonight. Okay, well, that's powerful. Well, I'm going to choose to go because I'm a good friend. And it's clear, it's much more anabolic. Your action is clear. So this brings us sort of to the end of the talk of energy levels. And, I hope that everybody, energy, you can feel it. Gloriana, you talk about this all the time in what you do, that you can tune energy from afar. There's the idea of the butterfly effect, that just a small flap of a wing can create a tsunami. And I want everyone to understand that we have the power together to shift energy. And even in our lowest states and our lowest energy frequencies, to know that you're not alone out there in that energy can sometimes be comforting too, to help you move out of this state to feel much more connected, right? You are not alone in this COVID isolation state. But I do beg you guys to ask yourself the question of, when this is all over, who do you want to be? What do you want to feel? What would you like to look back at this time and say you did? Not should have done, but did. And to really understand that we're all in this together, which can be uplifting all on its own and shift energy too. So if anyone is interested, I'll just give the quick wrap up. If anybody is interested in doing this assessment, I am offering right now the assessment at $99. And if you'd like to do a debriefing with it, which is about a half an hour conversation with me to go over it so I can explain it to you and go through the questions and areas and key points, it's $150 for the assessment itself and the debriefing. And this is my information. This is my website, thetaspring.com. That is my email, ajanelli@thetaspring.com. And again, this is the work that you can do with a friend. I always tell people, when I actually was coaching the NBA Referee Association, they came back a month later and they kept saying, oh, you're at a level 2, you're at a level 2. And it's interesting when you have someone to do the work with, how aware you become. And I'll just close with that change can happen in an instant, but change happens through first awareness, where we begin to evolve our behaviors, and then slowly they just adapt in. And so this is the work that I'm helping speed up for a lot of people through helping you understand yourself better. So thank you guys so much for being on this call with me. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know right now.
Thank you, Alex. That was, as one of the comments here is, everything was so well said. Thank you. I agree. That was really well said. You're getting lots of thank yous here. And it's funny, you said try, and I was like, no, we're all going to intend.
Thank you. It's good to have someone that's accountable for you to check your language, because sometimes you miss it. My clients get really angry at me sometimes in session. I'm like, there's the fighter. There, I love it. There you go. You leave much more action potential, but it's scary to be in that state too. So.
All right, Maureen, I see that you have a question. I'm going to unmute you. Hey, what's your question?
Oh, is that for Christine?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry. Like, I don't even know how to write a message, but I guess I did something I raised my hand or whatever.
You have a question, Christine?
No, I don't. I just want to say thank you also.
Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
No, that was great. It was great.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And if anyone would like copies of these worksheets, please feel free to email me. I can certainly email them over. I am in the process of putting them online so that they're easily downloaded too.
Same here. The recording of this video will be on my website as well, and I'll share it on Facebook, Gloriana Fontaine on Facebook, or my website, which is glorianafontaine.com. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand, type them in the box, unmute yourself. And at the end there, I'm going to reiterate this message came up in yesterday's call with the astrologer Lolita, who was talking about the astrology at the time, that this is a really good time to be creative, meaning we don't have to sit on our computers and Facebook or in front of the television watching the news. We can take this opportunity to kind of go within, and let's say the whole world changed and you had to offer the world something from your heart. What would that be? Would it be making clothes? Would it be gardening? Would it be science and technology? What would that look like? What do you have to give from your heart? And like, if the internet shut down, the government stopped, money ceased to exist, what would you do? And take the opportunity. I'm calling this sort of like a little gift from the universe, a little staycation. And so maybe you want to get into the creator space and find out what it is from your heart that you want to offer, and that might make your heart sing. And maybe do that while we're all at home.
More fun, less fear.
Yeah, exactly. We're intending for fun.
Yes.
At least that's where I am. I'm having fun with this. So I'm again, thank you all for being here so much. I really appreciate seeing so many people on the calls. Tomorrow is a workout with dance and yoga, and it's going with 70s music. It's going to be a lot of fun. Then we have past life regression on Wednesday, tuning. This is the only time I'm doing a free tuning, so you might as well get on the call. Really helps with anxiety and stress and just relaxing. Or if you can't sleep, it's really good too. Friday we'll have what do I have Friday? There's a whole list. Go check it out. Saturday there's card reading. Oh, Friday's Dolphin Energetics, which is a friend of mine here in Hawaii who does really great for unblocking areas. And all of these things are really marrying well together. I'm seeing how it's all coming together and how important Alex's information is for all of this. So I really want to thank you, Alex, for being here with us today.
Thank you for asking me, Gloriana. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Same here.
I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. For Alex, do you also do you do training as well, like for people looking to go into coaching, or do you just coach people?
I just coach people. I highly recommend the program that I went through, and I'm happy to share that information with you. It was IPAC. It was a very transformative program. It's
IPAC or
IPEC. You can let them know I referred you. It is awesome. There's 3 modules that you go through. I believe they might even do the first one for free. And it's all about working on yourself, the first module, because they're like, we want you to be as grounded and centered in life as possible. And it's really cool, the program, because they pull from Buddhism, like psychology, all these amazing different things, which is how the guy came up with this whole energy level assessment. And it's so great. So, I mean, it was one of the more transformative periods of my life, was going through the program. I think there's 3 modules, and then you can do the first one, and then the in between there's like calls that you get on and stuff, which some of them were not as great, but coming out of it, it was amazing. And it's like very low stress.
And where is it located?
They do them all over the country. So
okay.
You could jump in on a module anywhere that they're doing them, but I know that they definitely do them in New York for sure.
All right, cool.
And they might even be doing them distance learning now too.
That would be amazing, especially in this. I'm like, if this is the time, it's going to be now.
The time for sure. But I would imagine they're moving most of their modules online at this time. So it might be a great time. IPAC, great. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much.
You're so welcome. All right, guys, unless anyone has any more questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, no, I think we're good.
Good. Well, thank you guys. Stay safe. Stay having fun.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Aloha.